So we've got this basic line chart that shows the coronavirus data. Let me show you again the sketch. The idea with this sketch is that we can show this line chart. So we got the line working. That's great. There are some other components that I would like to add here. In the sketch, I had this idea of a line for 10,000 that was just crossed yesterday, and then another line for now. I think that would be cool. One line for 10,000 and one line for now. And we can do all that without any D3 axes or anything. And I think it would be a nice, straightforward test of the, our understanding of scales and how to put new things on there. So let's go about adding the line for 10,000. And then once we want to add the label for 10,000, that's when I think we're going to need the margin convention. But we can just add the line first, and then add the margins, and then add the label. So that's what I'm thinking we're going to do here. Should be fun. So we've got this basic coronavirus line chart. Let's go about adding that line that says 10,000. What does that look like? How should we do that? I mean, what file should be responsible for what? Let's just quickly review our app component. So we've got our app that uses the data from the useData hook, and then it's passing it into line chart. But where should we add this extra line? Is it part of line chart? I think it is. Yeah, I think we can safely put it in here somewhere. So let's get started by adding an SVG line element. Now, what is this SVG line element? How can we use it? Let's do a Google search for SVG line MDN. MDN is hands down the best. So here's an example line where it's just a line element that has x1, y1, x2, and y2. This is what a line needs to exist. So I'm just going to paste that in here and auto format. So x1 and y1, that's the starting point for the line. And x2 and y2, that's the ending point for the line. So we need to think about where this line should be. It's going to be representing 10,000, so it should be somewhere around here. It's going to be a flat line, like this, a horizontal line, not a vertical line. And horizontal lines start and end at the exact same y position. So I can tell you right now we're going to want to have something called y, or let's be a little more specific and call it marker line y, because y could be anything. I don't want it to get it confused. This maybe ultimately could be its own separate component, a marker line, but let's cross that bridge when we get there. Let's get it working first. So marker line y is going to be used as both y1, and in JSX you need to format it like this, and y2. And then we're going to need marker line x1 and 2. So I'll just fill in these here. Marker line, boom. So now we need to figure out what should these values be. Marker line y, and keep in mind that's going to be representing 10,000 deaths. That was our goal here. So I know the definition is going to involve 10,000, so I'm just going to note it down there. Marker line x1 and x2, that just serves to put the line all the way across the screen. So I can tell you right now, marker line x1 is going to be 0, and marker line x2 is going to be width. And marker line y is not really going to be 1,000. It's going to be 1,000 passed through the scale, because 1,000 is a value in the domain of the scale, namely the extent of the death total. So we just need to pass this through the scale, like this, y scale of 1,000. I think now our line is there, but we just can't see it. So let's try assigning a stroke style to this line and say stroke is black. And there's a line. There's a line there. But it doesn't look to be at the right spot. Oh, that's 1,000. Huh. So 10,000 is there. All right. That looks right. And, you know, now that I think of it, we don't need to add a line for right now because right now is where it ends. So I styled the path with CSS. Let me just be consistent and do the same for this here. And just so that, you know, in case we end up with more lines, I'm going to give this a class of marker line. And so now in our CSS, I'm going to say dot marker dash line. This is how we can style the marker line. Let's say it has a stroke of black and a stroke width of 5 pixels, or let's try 2 pixels. All right, that looks decent. So this is a pretty good milestone. We have this line chart that shows the coronavirus death total over time and when it crosses 10,000. But if you're looking at this visualization, I mean, if somebody shows you this, you're going to be like, what does this mean? What is this? There's no labels or anything, right? It's pathetic. So that's what we need to focus on next, the labels. But this is sort of a good stopping point. So what I'm going to do is say coronavirus basic line chart with 10,000 marker line. I'm going to fork from this one. And now we can implement the margin convention. Yeah, the margin convention is this whole thing that has some nice visual content around it. Let me just explain the margin convention briefly. There's this canonical work on blocks.org. Oh, now it's in observable. How about that? This is a good diagram that just explains the margin convention, where the origin is here, margin.left is the spacing on the left side, margin.top is the spacing on the top, margin.right is the spacing on the right, and margin.bottom is the spacing on the bottom. So let's go about introducing that margin object. In linechart.js, we can say margin is an object with top 0, right 0, bottom 0, and left 0. And now let's think about where do we actually need margins here. I think we really need a left margin to pull this content away from the edge to make room for our label. That's this 10,000 label here. So let's give it a non-zero left margin, like let's say 30 pixels. That should be enough for a number. We can tweak it later. And then, down in our SVG element, we can add a new group element around our line and our path. So begin group, end group, and I'll format that. We need to take this group and move it around, meaning transform everything inside this group element by translating it based on the margin, left and top. So we can say in G, transform equals, I'm going to go into ES6 string template literal mode here. The transform equals translate of, I'll just put 0, 0 to explain that the first argument is the translation in the x direction, meaning to the right, and the second one is translation in the vertical direction, meaning down from the top. And so translating to the right, we're going to have to use the left margin. So this should be, and I'm going to break out into JavaScript here, margin.left. This is the magic of ES6 string template literals. You can, use this syntax to escape out into JavaScript. So you can actually put any JavaScript expression right in here, which is sweet. And then in the y direction, I'm going to break out again into JavaScript and say the translate in the y direction should be margin.top. Okay, so we've transformed everything there. Now there's a little gap. See that? if I full screen this, you can see that indeed there is a little gap there. But the problem is everything sort of goes off the edge of the screen because relative to this starting point, the scales are still using in their range 0 to width and 0 to height. We need to come up with this new concept of inner width and inner height. Back in this explainer on the margin convention in Observable, you see this rectangle, the gray rectangle there? Well, that rectangle has a width of what I would call inner width, and it has a height of what I would call inner height. And how do you get inner width? Well, you got to take the width and subtract the left margin and the right margin. And how do you get inner height? Well, you got to take the height and subtract margin.top and margin.bottom. So let's do that. Back in our code here, the problem is where we're defining range on the scales. This needs to be inner width. And for the Y scale, this needs to be inner height. And how do we compute inner width and inner height? Well, like I said, for inner width, you got to take width and then subtract margin dot left and also subtract margin dot right. And for inner height, you got to take the height and subtract margin dot top and margin dot bottom. Now it looks like there's some error happening. Uncaught reference error, width is not defined. Red alert! How and why is width not defined? Well, we're talking about this section here, and it kind of makes sense because width and height are defined only inside the line chart because they're passed in from the outside. Remember in index.js, when we invoke the line chart component, we pass in width and height. And so that needs to be our source of truth for width and height. So I think we just can't define these out here. We need to define them in here and before the scales, because the scales use these. All right, there we go. I think it worked. See that? Boom. And it kind of looks a little weird. Like, sort of goes up against the bottom and the right because we don't have any margins. But hey, that's what margins are for, right? Let's take advantage of our right margin. Let's say right margin is 10 pixels. I would say boom, but I'm noticing a little bug here that the line goes up to the edge still. So I think we need to take this into account in our line component as well. Yeah, there it is. Marker line x2 actually should be inner width. That's that. Boom! Now I can say it. Boom. See? We've got a right margin. And just for good measure, I suppose, let's add a little bit on the top and a little bit on the bottom. All right, now, somebody there? Okay, yeah, they still look uncomfortably close to the edge, and I can totally understand that. So let's do something cool that you can do in VizHub, which is in Vim mode, if you hit Shift-V and then colon S slash, I can replace all those 10s with 20s. Slash G, so that's S slash 10 slash 20 slash G. This is a Vim mode regular expression thingamajig that makes a replacement. So if you hit enter, boom. Now the margins are all 20. A little bit more? Maybe 40. And yeah, it's a little, it's more breathable. It has more white space. I like that. But this space on the left doesn't actually look like it's enough for text. So let me make that like, I don't know, 300? That's too much. What about 90? Yeah, I could imagine a little 1,000 being right there, or 10,000 being right there. But this is a pretty good milestone. I mean, I just want to say, that's how you do the margin convention. That's all you need to do. Just to recap the margin convention, you define a margin object with top, right, bottom, and left, and then you need to compute inner width and inner height, and then use those in the scales, and whatever thing that you are using that needs to go all the way across that inner rectangle. So this is a pretty good milestone. Now we're in a position to add this label, 10,000. So how do we do that? Well, in SVG, you can use a text element. So text, or I think it has to be like this, open text, close text, and then I'll just say 10,000. And, oh, there it is. It says 10,000 right there. But it's not lined up to anything. It's not aligned. And so the text alignment is what we need to work on now. What I'm thinking is it shares a lot of similarities with marker line, because marker line x1 and marker line y is this point right here. And I think that's where we need to start. So in SVG text, you can give it x and y. So x, I think, should be marker line x1, and y, I think, should be marker line y. Okay, now it's aligned. See that? But it's aligned with respect to the bottom left corner of the text. And that's where it's sort of problematic for us, because I want to align this to the right center. But I think we can do that. I have to just research a little bit about SVG text. Vertical align and horizontal align. Yeah, there's alignment baseline, and then there's, how do you do horizontal align? It's text anchor. Yeah, it's these two like super weirdly named things. But yeah, text anchor is what you need for vertical. So let's try that. And I believe that can be an attribute. Yeah, like this, not a style. So it can look just like that. If we go over here, in the text, we can say text anchor equals middle. And there's a little gotcha here with React. I don't think React likes these dashes. I think we might need to do it like that. Although, wait a minute. That actually worked. Oh, so maybe that's fine. Okay, so that's our horizontal alignment. Before we go any further, I kind of want to just make it a little bigger. So in our CSS, we can say text, all text elements shall be font size, I don't know, 16 pixels, let's say. That's pretty, I think that's the default. That's pretty darn small. How about 64? 2EM? Yeah, we can use EM here, totally. Yeah, 2EM looks great. That's about the size I was imagining right there. And with fonts nowadays, I've been having a predisposition toward using the open font stack, or the, what's it called? The system font stack that comes with Create React app. So let me just take a little detour to get the font right, because I want to get the font right on this. If I open up a terminal, I'm going to make a new directory, CRA testing, and then I'm just going to execute Create React app. And, oh man, hold on. So Create React app is this amazing boilerplate for starting a React application in your own local development environment. And they have this amazing, oh, I didn't run Create React app yet. Oh, I'm getting some text distortions. That's weird. Are you all seeing that text distortion? The image distortion there? Yep. So if you run Create React app, you got to give it a name. I'll just call it testing. And then it's going to run all this stuff and set up a React app. And it includes a really nice little snippet about setting the font on everything to be a nice system font stack. And so I'm running this just so I can grab that out of there and use that in VizHub. And by the way, anything you do in VizHub, you can just export the files, move them into an application that uses Create React app, which is very popular nowadays. And everything should just work because it uses ES6 imports like that. All right, so in this Create React app, very fresh thing, in source app.css, or no, in source index.css, here it is, font family. This is a really cool font family. It uses whatever font is built into the operating system of the viewer. So they've went and picked, the best fonts that are available, so you don't need to pull in any fonts from like Google Fonts or anything, but yet you get really good looking text. So that's what I'm after here. So I can take that and paste it right here in VizHub and apply it to the body. And now the font has changed on our 10,000, and I believe it's using Ubuntu because I'm on Linux. And so that's a really nice looking font, better than, whatever was showing before, which is just the default. I don't even know what it is. But anyway, now we have a nice, crisp, nice looking 10,000. We just need to align it correctly. So the alignment we've done so far, we said text anchor is middle. But text anchor, doesn't have to be middle, and I don't think we want it to be middle. It could be start, which I think is the default. See that alignment? It's aligned to the lower left. But it could also be end. That aligns it to the lower right. So this is what I'm looking for. Now I want to align it vertically to be in the center of this line, which it's not. It's currently above it. So that would be alignment baseline. Alignment baseline attribute specifies how an object is aligned with respect to its parent. So this is something that you can use with SVG text elements. Here's a really nice visual example of this, where alignment baseline is hanging, and they have the little visual here. So it's hanging from the bottom. It's like an icicle or something hanging down. And then the middle is in the middle. That's what we want. And we don't want baseline, which is the default, which is what it's doing now. So let's just copy this. Alignment baseline is middle. And then in our code here, we can apply that to our SVG text element. And now the labeling is pretty much how I wanted it to be. But it's getting cut off, so it looks like we need to go back and tweak the margin, specifically the left margin. Let's try 120. That looks decent, but let's let it breathe a little. How about 150? Or 160? I don't know. It's personal preference. It's a design thing. I don't know how to put, how to decide how much white space to put. But it's a little too close to that line. See that? It's very close to that line. I want to add a little bit of white space. Let's see how we could do that. I think we can just tweak the definition of this text element to get it done. For example, on Y, see here, this is the line that defines Y, which is the vertical direction, and X, which is horizontal. And so if we just subtract a little bit, like 5 pixels, then it adds a little 5 pixel gap. Easy peasy. Or 50 if you want to move it really far away. But I just wanted a little gap, maybe 8. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I think this is a pretty effective visualization. But now that I see it like this, I kind of do want to add the marker for now, just to make it explicit. I think I'm just going to go ahead and add that other line for right now. It's going to be a vertical line on the right, and it's going to come down, it's going to say now. Just like this says 10,000, it's going to say now. I think this would be an effective, simple visualization without the axes, that you could show people, and they would understand the relative scales of everything. This is like saying to somebody, the death toll crossed 10,000 2 days ago, which is what happened. But this tells you how much it climbed. That is an exponential curve and so on. So I think that's what I'm going to do next. Well, I'm going to write the code that I want to see. I want to see Y marker line, and we pass into their, or value, let's pass into their value would be 10,000. And then Y marker line should be able to take care of the rest. So let me just define that right here. And then we'll be able to make an X marker line, see how they're different. Yeah, I think this is the right approach. So I'll say const Y marker line, a function that returns, and this is where I could just move all this logic into here. And these definitions can go inside. And then this is what we want to return, this JSX. Oh yeah, now we're getting this error. Oh, my favorite error. I love this one. Adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. You know what that means? We have to use a React fragment like this. Boom, boom, to open it and to close it. Boom, boom, boom. Now the auto format should work and all is well again with the world. Okay, and even our code is working. That's great. So what did we pass in to Y marker line? We passed in value is 10, that should be 10,000. Value is 10,000. And so in the definition, we need to unpack value like that from the props and then pass it into Y scale like this. And if we wanted to, well, I do want to split this out into a separate file because this file is getting pretty long, almost 60 lines. So, and this is a good thing to just split out. So I'm going to make a new file, ymarkerline.js, and then I'll take all of this and put it in that file and export it. And then in line chart, we can import ymarkerline from /ymarkerline. And we might get some errors. Y scale is not defined. Yeah, I think there's some things that we need to pass in that we're not passing in. So what does ymarkerline need to know about? Apparently Y scale, yeah, it needs to know the Y scale because it's being passed through. And it also needs value. Yeah, let's just pass in Y scale. I think that's the simplest way to do it. So if we accept Y scale there, we need to pass it in here. Y scale is Y scale. And what else? Oh my gosh! It works! All right, so that's how you can refactor that Y marker line out into a separate module so your line chart component is not getting overwhelmed with that logic. And now we can just copy paste that and change Y to X and the value to be now, but not exactly now. And this is probably going to need to know about X scale. So when it comes to this now, where do we get this from? Well, we have it in use data, remember? And now that I'm remembering how the data is structured, the last element in that data array is going to be essentially now. It's going to be the most recent data point. So let's isolate that. We can isolate that right here, I think. It's going to be data at data.length -1. Let me just console.log that to see what it is. Uh-oh. Reference error, X marker line is not defined. Well, that makes sense. We haven't defined it. So I'm just going to comment out this line for now. Let's work out this other piece and then get back to that. Okay, we're getting undefined because I misspelled length. So we need to access .date on this object. So the last data point, .date. This is going to be now, or most recent date. Wait a minute, we already have it as the extent of the xscale domain. So that might be actually a more elegant way to get at it. Yeah, xscale.domain at index 1 should be the same thing, and it is. So what should we call this? I'm going to call it most recent date. And so the value that we want to pass in to X marker line, which we can define now, is going to be most recent date. And now let's go ahead and define that. I'm going to do the import first, replace X with Y, and then I'm going to make a new file called X marker line, and then I'm going to copy paste everything from Y marker line into X marker line, and then modify it as needed. So let's export the renamed version. So now our component runs, but we have the error Y scale is not a function. That makes sense because now we're passing in X scale instead. And so marker line, well, now is because it's going the other direction, we're going to have marker line X and then marker line Y1 and then marker line Y2. Marker line X is going to be X scale of the value. Marker line Y1 is going to be 0, and marker line Y2 is going to be inner height. And we need to define that. Yeah, we need to pass in inner height from line chart. Inner height equals inner height. And I was noticing for Y marker line, it's referencing inner width, and I'm confused as to why that's working because we didn't pass it in. So let me just fix that. We should be passing in inner width as a prop to Y marker line. So Y marker line needs inner width equals inner width. Anyway, we're in a broken state. Let's get out of that broken state and see what else needs to be changed. Yeah, we just need to go through and pass in the right stuff. So Y1 is going to be Y. So now in X marker line X needs to be 1 and X2. Y needs to be changed to Y1. Y2 needs to be changed to Y2. And the text also is going to be in a different spot. Okay, we got it working to some degree. All right, this is great, this is great, this is great. All I want to do now is move this text label to the bottom and have it centrally aligned with respect to this line and have probably the same gap that we have over here, but vertical instead of horizontal. So we got our friends here, text anchor and alignment baseline. I think text anchor can be middle. Yep, see now it's in the middle. That's good. And alignment baseline can be hanging. Yeah. See that? Now, instead of using Y1, if we just use Y2, it should go to the bottom. And then instead of subtracting 8 from X, let's add 8 to Y. Now we get that nice white space, and all we need to do to wrap this up is go back and change the margins. Namely, the right margin needs to be more because it's going off the right edge. Let's say 100. Or that might be too much, maybe 80. Yeah, it's showing the wrong text. I'm just getting the alignment right. Yes, that's a very good point. So it should not be saying 10,000. Instead, it should be saying now. There we go. And I'm realizing now that, the label is hard-coded in this component, which is not ideal, but probably it's fine to just leave it for now. If we need to generalize these further, we can do this. We'd have to get into the formatting and everything. Yeah, I mean, we could add another pair of these for 1,000. Like, when did it reach 1,000 deaths? I'd be curious actually to see that.
We should do X and Y axis.
Oh yeah, we've got to add the axes and the tick marks. Tick marks are cool to have, for sure. All right, so this is what I wanted to get to. This is a pretty good milestone. We got right now, and over there we got 10,000. Sweet! See that? That's how you can do it. Start with an idea and just keep going until it's done. That thing's not focusing. Focus! Here we go. We've implemented most of this sketch. The only remaining things are the axes, like Nita was saying.
It looks exactly similar to your sketch.
Doesn't it?
How did you do that?
I just sort of knew this is how it would look.
Nice.
So since I drew these X tick marks first, let's go for that. Let's try to add the X-axis.